What exactly happens as a person dies?
After a person dies, how long does consciousness remain in the body and why?
If the body is cremated within 3 days of death, what happens to the consciousness? How can we guide children when they face death?
What is the dying process like? In the intensive care unit, we do everything we can to save patients. Sometimes it is very hard to keep someone alive, and sometimes there is no hope at all. What exactly happens as a person dies?
When we seek to help a patient, we must not only treat the body, it is even more important to tend to the mind. When there is no hope, there are two situations. Some will certainly pass away. For those who are passing away, if they are Buddhists, it is relatively easier. At least they do not feel in their hearts that this life is the final end of everything. This life is only a temporary stop. There is still a next life. At that moment, we should help them leave without sorrow or fear, because there is still hope and light in their next life. At the time of death, it is best to have a Buddha statue nearby and to recite sacred mantras. This kind of blessing truly provides the deepest comfort. Each one of us will pass away one day, but how we die makes a difference. I have thought about this myself. When my time comes, I hope I can see a Buddha statue. I hope to hear people reciting the Buddha's name beside me, and that my own mind can depart in a state of compassion and wisdom. So I sincerely hope that when many people are passing, those around them can support them through Buddhist practice, which is the most effective kind of help. Because when a patient is about to pass away, all their possessions and words of comfort are no longer of any use. They themselves know nothing more can be done. At that moment, the most helpful thing is to focus on their next life and on how to reduce their own suffering. The people beside them are extremely important. I have seen in some hospitals that for patients who truly cannot survive, monks or lay practitioners are specifically arranged to recite prayers for them. We also advocate and encourage this. As someone nears death, prayers should be recited for them. This is deeply important for every one of us.
I think what my colleague is asking is this: how should we make decisions about resuscitation? As doctors, our duty is to save lives, but we face a dilemma. At what point should we stop resuscitation efforts and allow the patient to prepare for death? Because aggressive intervention can interfere with a peaceful passing. If we truly want to help them die peacefully, we need a different approach. But it is very difficult to know when to make that shift. How do we decide which approach is right? Could you offer us some guidance?
From the perspective of a doctor's and hospital's responsibility, it is necessary to carry out all available resuscitation measures. But from the perspective of spiritual practice, many people in Tibetan regions are reluctant to die in a hospital because of all the resuscitation procedures involved. So this should be handled according to the specific circumstances of the patient, their family, and other factors. If the family members are willing, we should still do what needs to be done. But if we know with certainty there is no hope, then we should allow them to pass away in peace and calm. This is a complex matter that should be considered case by case, taking into account both the patient's situation and the wishes of the family.
After a person dies, how long does consciousness remain in the body and why?
Generally speaking, the Buddhist scriptures tell us that consciousness leaves the body within 3 to 4 days after death. Traditionally, it is best not to handle the remains within those 3 days. This is the teaching of the Buddhist scriptures. The intermediate state, bardo, is generally said to last 49 days. After 49 days, except in special circumstances, one takes rebirth.
Is there any basis or explanation for this? Does consciousness really remain in the body after death?
When it comes to the nature of consciousness, we rely primarily on the scriptural evidence found in Buddhist texts. Many scriptures describe that before consciousness leaves the body, this is indeed what happens. Moreover, Many people today, including some in the medical field, have observed that after a person dies, signs of consciousness seem to persist in the body. Because of this, Japan once had a specialized research institute in psychophysiology that observed this phenomenon and concluded that consciousness may remain in the body for up to 3 days. This aligns remarkably well with what Buddhism teaches. Consciousness is, in truth, a profoundly mysterious thing. We cannot grasp it through conceptual thinking alone, but by drawing on wisdom and careful observation, approaching the teachings of Buddhist scripture and combining them with scientific inquiry, this understanding holds. Just as we rely on medical texts to resolve questions in medicine, many deep questions about life and consciousness have, up to now, been addressed through religious teachings and these classical texts. In our world, there is indeed specialized knowledge dedicated to exactly this. The Buddhist understanding of life has now become a recognized field of specialized inquiry. Because so much of what relates to consciousness cannot yet be explained by science, yet it was already addressed in Buddhist scriptures over 2,500 years ago with clear explanations. For this reason, a new generation of scientists today has no choice but to draw upon Buddhist knowledge. In my own view, to understand the deeper aspects of life, one must extensively study the scriptures of Theravada Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, and Chinese Buddhism. Through careful study of these texts, one discovers that many things which science cannot yet explain clearly can in fact be fully answered right here. There is something I would like to mention. Many people today place their trust in science, but in reality, science itself is often unable to draw definitive conclusions. Not long ago, while I was in Beijing, I had a conversation with Professor Zhu Qingxi, former president of the University of Science and Technology of China. In fact, he once said, when scientists have labored to climb the mountain peak, they find the Buddhist masters have long been waiting there. When I spoke with him, I asked, "You are a scientist, why would you say such a thing?" When I asked him, he shared his own conviction that through the study of life in Buddhist teachings, he would find explanations for many things that science today cannot account for. Having served as president of the University of Science and Technology of China for 10 years, I believe that those who have devoted their lives to science will ultimately find answers in Buddhism as well. He studied texts such as the Yogacara Bhumi Shastra and the Shurangama Sutra. He also learned a great deal from Master Nan Huai-Chin, and in the end he came to say those words.
You said consciousness leaves the body 3 to 4 days after death. Is this the same for everyone, or does it vary? Does stronger attachment mean consciousness lingers longer, and weaker attachment mean it departs more quickly?
In Buddhism, 3 to 4 days is said to be the outer limit. Everyone's situation may differ. Some depart very quickly.
During those first 3 days after death, can consciousness still perceive the state of the body?
Our consciousness actually has both coarser and subtler aspects. Although the coarser aspect has already become unconscious or faded away, the subtler aspect, whether still within the body or, as I mentioned, in the bardo, is not bound by the physical body and moves freely. It is not necessarily fixed in one part of the body. It can be anywhere in the body, depending on sensation. This is why, when people touch the body, warmth can remain for a long time. Its presence comes and goes in various ways, and the situations are many. Because sentient beings have different karma, the ways in which consciousness dwells are even more varied. There are stories in Buddhism of people whose consciousness leaves the body and then returns to find that their bodies have already been prepared for burial. They feel deep grief, and there are indeed many such accounts. There is an American doctor named Dr. Brian Weiss who has extensively studied questions about life. He now has over 20,000 cases documenting various states of consciousness. Some involve out-of-body experiences, others involve recovering past life memories through hypnosis.
If the body is cremated within 3 days of death, what happens to the consciousness?
In Tibetan Buddhism, we generally try to keep the body for at least 3 days. Otherwise, when consciousness returns, it has no home.
I am a nurse. When a doctor decides to stop cardiopulmonary resuscitation, we feel a profound sense of helplessness. That is the patient's final moment. The wisdom about death that I have learned is to help the patient turn their attention to their breath, to keep their awareness on the breath until the very end. I'm a pediatric nurse. I want to know, how can we guide children when they face death? With adult patients, I can tell them that we have past lives, this life, and future lives, but I do not know how to help my young patients face death. Adults can sense when death is approaching, but I think children do not understand death at all, nor do they know what lies ahead. We know they are suffering, but they have no framework for understanding what death means.
In fact, certain Buddhist teachings are much like general education. Even adults do not always understand them right away. It takes a great deal of time and learning. The same is true for children. In their daily lives, including their own cultivation, if they do not understand the reality of life and death, we should provide them with positive guidance from an early age. In life, faith alone from childhood is not enough. It must be accompanied by wisdom. Only with wisdom can one truly understand the meaning of life.
Here is an example. One of my colleagues cared for his elderly mother as she neared death. One day, he said to us, the more he clung to his mother, the more he suffered, yet he could not help himself. The deeper his attachment grew, the greater the pain. He had no way to control his feelings. How should we help someone in that situation?
In fact, the Buddhist scriptures tell us that the more attached we are to anything, the more we suffer. This applies equally to attachment to family, possessions, or status. The tighter we cling, the deeper the suffering. So it is important to understand that excessive attachment, whether to one's mother or to others, will inevitably give rise to suffering of all kinds. This is why Buddhism speaks of seeing through and letting go, of reducing suffering. Completely ending all suffering at once is very difficult, but we should do our best to lessen it. Only by loosening his attachment can we begin to ease his suffering.
Could you briefly summarize the 12 links of dependent origination?
To summarize, among the 12 links of dependent origination, the first 2 links, ignorance, avidya, and volitional formations, samskara, are associated with the past life. In the present life, the links are consciousness, name and form, the 6 sense bases, contact and feeling. These links represent the results unfolding in the present life due to past karma. Craving, clinging, and becoming constitute the causal conditions in the present life that generate future existence. Birth and aging and death belong to the next life, completing the cycle. We explain this across 3 lifetimes, 2 links in the past life, 8 in the present life, and 2 in the next life. Of the 8 links in this life, the first 3 are results of the past life, and the last 3 are causes for the next life. Of the 12 links, ignorance appears to come first. But in truth, ignorance exists in past, present, and future lives alike. What we call ignorance is simply self-grasping at the center of the cycle. In Tibetan Buddhist monasteries, you will always find a painting of the Wheel of Life. This represents that everyone needs to understand samsara.
What wisdom do you see contained within the 12 links of dependent origination?
If we fail to understand this teaching, then whether we are caring for others or cultivating ourselves, there is little real difference between us and atheists, because we only see causes and conditions within this one life, with no connection to past or future lives. That is not wisdom, it is ignorance. That is why I am especially concerned when I see some Buddhists today in certain places. They only acknowledge that good deeds bring good results, and bad deeds bring bad results in this lifetime. but they do not truly understand what comes before this life or what comes after it. This is a lack of wisdom. So if we want to develop wisdom, we must understand this teaching.
The teaching you just described also has a direct counterpart in Pali, the principle of dependent origination you mentioned. My question is this: since the 12 links of dependent origination form a cycle, which link is the most critical one to address in order to break free from it?
Among the 12 links, ignorance is the most essential. It is the identification with the self and the attachment to that self, because the self and what belongs to the self do not truly exist, yet sentient beings cling to them as if they do. If we sever ignorance at its root, we will no longer experience the suffering of cyclic existence, just as the Arhats have done. As I mentioned, many monastics and practitioners devote their practice precisely to cutting through ignorance. Once this root is severed, it will never arise again. But if we never cut it, even though we do good deeds, we will continue to wander in samsara.
For those who already believe in samsara, faith makes it easier to accept the Dharma, even though the teachings themselves are not simple. It is relatively easy to guide and help them through the Buddhist teachings. But for those who do not believe in samsara, what would you suggest as a way to help them?
In a way, the Dharma is like a science of mind and consciousness. As I said earlier, for those who already believe, you can explain it in those terms. But for those who do not believe, Buddhism has a specific line of reasoning about the causes and conditions of consciousness. Consciousness is fundamentally different from matter. The cause of consciousness is consciousness, and its immediate cause is also consciousness. The physical body cannot serve as its cause. Take, for example, a child today who has mastered 8 languages at the age of 8. Even a skeptic would have to acknowledge that there must be some prior cause and condition at work. Otherwise, looking only at the physical body, there is no explanation for how a child could master 8 languages. This is why in Buddhism we say this is reasoned through wisdom and then shared with others. As for me, I find this quite easy to understand. Of course, for someone without faith, it may take a little more effort at first, but in truth, it is not so difficult to help others see this, because even though science now studies the body, it has not yet been able to directly observe or measure the mind, nor has it concluded whether the mind has causes from previous lives. Despite all of science's advances, no definitive answer has been reached. Consider the case of a child in Sri Lanka. This has been reported in many international newspapers. There was a child who could recall his previous life as a former president of Sri Lanka. His family had no religious faith whatsoever, yet he himself could clearly remember many details from his past life. Scientists have no way to explain this. It has become a complete mystery, one they have no idea how to unravel.
Regarding the 12 links of dependent origination, I find I still cannot grasp them fully. I understand they describe the cycle of past, present, and future lives. If I do believe in past lives, what can I do right now to prepare for my future lives?
Yes, if you accept that yesterday existed, you must also accept that today exists. And if you accept today, you can also accept tomorrow.
Are you saying that if I do good things now, there will be good karmic results in the future? Is that right?
Yes. If you are a Buddhist, the most fundamental teachings are the 6 realms of samsara and the 12 links of dependent origination. Buddhists must study and understand the 12 links of dependent origination. If we only know the basics of doing good deeds without developing a deep understanding, we are very likely to fail to actually practice well. And if we do not practice, accepting only part of the teachings while ignoring the rest, we cannot be called genuine, complete practitioners.
Thank you so much for coming to Thailand. What you shared with us was very profound. Could you recommend a book on this topic?
What I have just explained is indeed quite difficult, but precisely because it is difficult, if we never read or study it, we will never break free from samsara. So, as I mentioned during the talk, among the Buddhist scriptures on the 12 links, I wonder whether there are versions in Pali or in Thai. In both Tibetan and Chinese, we have the Sutra of Dependent Origination. The principles are explained with great clarity in it. So my recommendation is the Sutra of Dependent Origination.
Today we have covered a great deal. We have all deeply felt your compassion and wisdom, and that is truly what you have brought to all of us. We hope you will visit our school again in the future. Let us all thank Khenpo together.